Feel a little lonely up here, but I guess we can start. Deputy Mayor, do you want to come up here, or you're comfortable there? So the way this is going to go tonight is Mr. Carabelli will speak. He is the assessor. He is not the tax assessor. He assesses property. Taxes are our business. We also have a representative from the state here that can talk about the anchor program. And I'm going to do a very short little piece on the bridge between assessment and taxes, because that's why you care about what your assessment is how it affects your taxes. Mr. Carabelli.
Thank you, Mayor. As the mayor stated, my name is Rick Carabelli, and I'm the municipal assessor here in Franklin. I've been the assessor since July of 2009, and prior to that, I was a tax consultant to Franklin. Just in a way of background, I'm a state-certified general real estate appraiser. Obviously, I'm a certified tax assessor. I'm a designated MAI member of the Appraisal Institute. And for the past 30 years, I've served as a commissioner on the Mercer County Board of Taxation, the majority of those years including this year, being president of that board. And lastly, in the assessment field, I serve as a member of the Tax Court Committee to the Supreme Court. It's a group of about 35 professionals headed by the presiding judge of the State Tax Court in New Jersey. And we're charged with making recommendations to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court with respect to the practice of law in state of New Jersey relating to tax appeals. The chain of command, so to speak, starts with the director of the Division of Taxation. He's everybody's boss. Beneath the director is the County Board of Taxation. It's like my board in Mercer. The one in Somerset is a 5-member board. The board oversees the operation of the county tax board, and it also supervises a tax administrator. In fact, our administrator from Somerset is here with us tonight. And last on the totem pole is the municipal assessor. If you look at the PowerPoint, it's obvious that on that PowerPoint, there's no mention of Franklin Township. There's no mention of Mr. Vornlocker, the business manager here, or municipal manager. There's no mention of Mr. Kramer, Mayor Kramer, or any of the elected officials. And that's by design. The legislature in New Jersey set out years ago to make a determination that there would be a separation between the assessment field and the governing body. And for obvious reasons, it seems to have worked. So Bob, even though I respect him, he's not my boss. And the mayor, the few times I run into him, he says the same thing every time, Mayor, just be fair. And I certainly try to do that, and I hope that we've been successful. So why do we assess? Well, we go through the assessment process to equally and fairly distribute the tax burden. In the state of New Jersey, that process is done through a system called ad valorem, which Latin means value added. So if your property, for example, is assessed at double what your neighbor's property is, you can figure it out mathematically. You're going to pay double in taxes what your neighbor's paying. By law, the municipality cannot raise more than they budgeted for. So every year there's the municipality goes through the budgeting process and makes a determination as to what percentage of that budget is going to be raised through taxation. And that's what the assessment does. It's going to give you some insight as to your share, what your fair share is going to be. But in no case can any property be assessed at more than 100% of its full and fair value. In appraisers speak, its true value or its market value. In order to maintain assessments, and this is probably most of what I do personally in my department, is done through three processes. The first is a revaluation. You hear towns that call it short. They're going through a reval. In that case, the municipality generally contracts with an outside firm. The firm comes in, handles inspections, and does a comparable sales search, goes through all the income and expense statements, and values each and every property in that municipality. The last reval here in Franklin was done in 1994. What is done, it was done annually. It's been done ever since I've been here, and I said that was July of 2009, is an annual reassessment. This is one of the in-house methods of maintaining assessments. Here in Franklin, I'm fortunate enough to have the proper staff, trained staff, qualified staff. My deputy has the same certification that I have with respect to being an assessor. So if I'm not here and he's here, it's the same as talking to me. He could sign anything I could sign, and of course vice versa. The last thing on the list is a compliance plan, and that's kind of I guess minimal in the amount of homes that are going to be adjusted, and it's probably something that could get you through a short period of time when you have small towns with no activity. But with 23,000 parcels, 23,000 or so parcels here in Franklin, kind of difficult to do a compliance plan, at least to be able to justify it. What do we do with reassessment? What's the program all about, and how does it work? To start with, each and every year, I'll apply with Charles and his board an application for the annual reassessment process. The board will either pass on it. If they don't rule on it within 45 days, it's automatically approved. If they do rule on it, it'll be forwarded to the Division of Taxation for the director to look at. And the same thing applies at that level. If we get no response, it's deemed approved. I've never run into that. It's never been an issue not to examine our request. It wouldn't be unusual to be questioned. I do the same thing in Mercer County. You want to make sure that it's done by the book. So there is some give and take between the board and the state as far as, what are you doing? Your tax map's up to date? Are you getting in to complete your inspections? If you couldn't get in, for example, with COVID, my inspectors weren't going into anyone's home, nor were any residents letting them in. It's certainly understandable. We couldn't stop the process, so we had to make up for those missed inspections the following year, which we did. So, you want to have that type of dialogue, and we've never had an issue with either the county tax board or the Division of Taxation. Part of the program is that the municipality attempt to get into at least 20% of the properties. I caught myself there. You have to do 20% of all the property classes. So we have to get into 20% of the residential properties, 20% of the office buildings, 20% of the garden apartments, and so on down the list. It isn't that you could run into a condo building and look at 300, 400, 500 units in a day and call it, a completed assignment. So if you sit down mathematically, hopefully, if we're doing the job correctly, or at least accurately, we're going to get into your property, or at least make an attempt to get into your property once every 5 years. The remaining properties that we don't earmark for interior inspections, we have to do at least a drive-by inspection. So we put two inspectors in a vehicle, and they'll ride neighborhoods to see, has someone put an addition on their home? Is there anything we can detect from the outside of the home that might have made a material change? And when we go through that process, so at least every property is viewed, albeit not from the interior all the time. When we go through the process of valuing these properties, we have to change under the program at least 50% of them. So we're changing a little over 11,000 properties. A change doesn't have to be an increase. There's been years where we've lowered values based upon market conditions. In any event, we have to look at all the values. A lot of people call, not a lot of people, but some people call and will say, I understand you got my home this year, so I can expect a change in my assessment, but, we're not going to have that for another 5 years or something like that. No, that's not how it works. You have to, in any type of assessment maintenance, you must look at all the properties, all the values. So we're looking at from October 1 until next Wednesday, which is the day our final list is due. We're looking at 23,000 values. When you value, or when we value real estate for assessment purposes, we use the three classical approaches to value. Some of these have been prescribed by court cases, some maybe by statute, and some by just practice. With respect to residential properties, and just looking in the audience, I would assume that most of the people in attendance here tonight are homeowners. We use what's called a sales comparison approach, and basically that's comparing your home to what similar properties have sold for or are listed for. And we try and get as much information as we can. I know a lot of people come in and they say, well, Mr. Jones has his house for sale for $500,000 and he'll never get $500,000. Well, as an appraiser and assessor, that tells me something. It may not tell me what it's worth, but it certainly tells me what it's not worth. So if I'm in that neighborhood and I have homes that are over 500,000 value, I better go take a look at that, because here's one that's just not getting that number. So every bit of information out there, whether it's a listing, a contract, a sale, or a closed sale, can tell an appraiser and assessor something. When you deal with special purpose properties, and by and large, most of the special purpose properties are exempt properties, such as schools and churches. We do have nursing homes, assisted living facilities. They're generally done by the cost approach because they're considered by the court to be special purpose, and of course I would agree with that. In that case, you would find the underlying land value and then add to that the net depreciated value of the improvements, which is kind of, subjective, but it works, and it certainly gets you in the ballpark. And lastly, with income-producing properties, the court's very specific. If you have a property, and it doesn't have to be a property that's leased, could be an owner-occupied 300,000 square foot office building, and we have some of them. We have to look at it and say, okay, if the owner wanted to lease this, what would they get? What kind of income could the real estate generate? And then we go through the income approach to value and come up with a concluded assessment. This is probably too small to say, but this is what I look at when I value a residential neighborhood. And again, I apologize for the size of this, but you can see to get the information on there was kind of difficult. But one of the things we do is we look at sales and listings in a neighborhood. Our neighborhood may not be your geographic neighborhood. The neighborhood is established by the assessment office, and it's a group of like properties, basically the best way to explain it. Geographically, it may not be what you call or what you refer to as your neighborhood. But if you can see, and I realize it's difficult, we've shaded the areas in blue. The homes that sold that are in blue tell me that they were overassessed. And if you look at the far right column, you could see that the blue values go as high as 115%. So that tells me that that home sold for 15% more than we had it assessed at. So I will go and look at that home and say, what would happen here? why was our assessment off on that? The yellow sales are sales that sold for less than 100%. So they sold for more than what they were assessed at. So, you can probably make a case. Now, there are different models in here, too. That's the other thing that we would want to look through. But you could probably make a case that in some cases, in some instances, we were under-assessed, and that's why I used this particular slide, and some we were over. So this neighborhood is going to need some analysis, and we're going to have to go into the individual homes and see why. And generally, it's a model. In a condo building, it may be a unit, an N unit. It may be a unit on the third floor as opposed to the first floor. And I'm just making this up. I'm not saying that there is that type of differential. But just to give you an example of what we look at before we determine what an assessment should be. Some of the misconceptions when we talk about the different types of property, residential, non-residential, is that there's different techniques. No, it's the same. It's the techniques that I explained to you. Also, the tax rate is the same. I get people calling me and they say, well, my taxes are so high because you say that I have a commercial property. Well, your taxes are what they are because of what we valued that property at, not because we have a different system of determining the tax rate. And this is just, for example, the past 5 years from 2018 through 2022. The general tax rate is the overall rate for the town, and you can see back in 18, it was about $2.25 per $100 of assessment. Now it's about $1.97, and that takes us up to the most current year, which would be 2022. The municipal rate, which is the money needed to carry the general government here, excluding things like the fire district, the school district, the county tax, or open space tax. And you can see that was about 36 cents per 100, and last year it was 28%. So, and Franklin, the tax rate has actually gone down in the past. So, yes, that's exactly. The question was, is it based on the budget? Yeah, and the answer is yes. Okay, this is probably the most important piece of mail you're going to get each and every year, especially from the township. This is your tax assessment notice. Now, this is an actual notice. We've taken the name off of there, redacted. We've redacted the name. But that's an actual, and I'm showing it because obviously they're public information. I wouldn't have just thrown it up there. But when you get this card, you can see that last year it was mailed March 8th. That's the exact mailing date. I would assume that somewhere between the 15th and March 8th, and Charles, you stop me if I'm misspeaking, we'll be mailing these notices for tax year 23. So what I would look at, when I get my assessment notice, is what's that assessment? Now keep in mind this is a 22 card, so you got 2022 assessment is $675,600. Below that is the prior year assessment, which was $635,600. So that's an increase of $40,000. So you want to be aware of that. I could tell you that probably, oh gosh, maybe 90% of the people that come in, I say, do you look at your notice? They say, yeah, I gave it to my accountant because it has on there what you paid in your property tax for the previous year. And if you're writing that off, then it's important to your accountant. Don't get the card and give it to the accountant. At least look at it first and see if you have a basis to call my office and say, hey, why the change? Anything you need on that card to fill out your appeal form, should you decide to take an appeal, is on that card. So that takes us to calculating the true value assessment. If you want to consider filing an appeal, you just have to ask yourself one question. What could you sell your home for? and don't say I'm not selling my home, but what could you sell your home for? October 1 that's the effective date of value, October 1 of the pre-tax year. So if you want to, you're going to be getting this car, like we say, in a few weeks. It's not the value when you get the card, it's the value October last year. If you can test it, and you go to the county, they want to know what it was worth October 1 of last year. You may not have your hearing until maybe June or so. So you want to be asked what it was worth eight months ago. Now, sometimes there's significant changes in market conditions. And if we look at a prime example close to all of us is COVID. People are saying somewhere between November of 19 and then to March of 20. That's the area in question here. So if the market went up or down, it may have an impact when you come to your hearing. But it didn't, the effective date of value, which was October 1. I don't think anybody was talking about a COVID October 1st of 2019. Sir.
So what I'd like to do is hold questions later because you're not going on the microphone. It's not being recorded. We're recording this whole thing. So if we could hold questions to the end, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so what could you sell your property for October 1 of the pre-tax year? And then you can make a determination as to whether or not you think it's over-assessed. As the mayor said when he introduced me, remember, you're appealing your tax assessment. I've heard a number of times, and I will hear this year and probably into the future, when I bought my home in 1960, my taxes were $600. Now they're $7,000. What we have to focus on, and the only variable in the equation that we can address, the assessment office and the county board, is the true value assessment. So that's what you want to focus on. Keep in mind, and the card is a little confusing. I actually should have put the reverse side of the card up as well. Kind of confusing. It talks about reassessments, revals, and that May 1 is the filing deadline. You may read it April 1, and if you get it in by April 1, that's fine. You get it in a month ahead of time. But you do have, in a revaluation town and a reassessment town like Franklin, you have until May 1st by statute. God bless you. Before you file, you want to do this. Call my office, and, this is an adversarial situation. We want to get it right. And sometimes that means we've made a mistake and we have to correct them. Sometimes it means that there's some misunderstanding. You may have gotten a tax bill and took the quarterly tax times 4 and said, that's my taxes went way up. So find out from my office exactly what transpired, why the change, assuming there was a change, how did you get to the value? You're entitled to know all that. Okay, so you want to review your assessment. The other thing you want to do is review what we call a property record card. That's our file as far as what we're valuing. We have the square footage of your home, we have the amenities of your home, so on and so forth. So we want to make sure that's right. If you don't have a finished basement and we have a finished basement, let's fix that. If you have an issue where we have made a mistake, we will correct it. You won't have to file an appeal. You won't have to go to the county. You won't have to do any research. You won't have to do anything. We'll fix it if it's our mistake. Now, a mistake isn't, you got us down for $250 and it's really worth $150. Well, that's an opinion. That's not a mistake. Okay, but if there's a mistake, we'll fix it. And we've done that, thank God, not that many times, but we've done it every time it's been brought to our attention. And we want to do that because we may have something in a neighborhood that's affecting everybody, something that we missed. It's, again, 23,000 properties. Chances are they're not all correct. In order to proceed with your appeal, you need credible evidence. Again, you don't want to say things like, everybody knows the market went down. Everybody knows, because it doesn't work that way. You're going to have to come in with some concrete proof of value. And it's really not that hard to get that, and I'll get into that later. One thing you want to keep in mind, though, when you file an appeal, that opens your assessment to review. And said another way, the assessment could go up, too. So if you have a finished basement, and I used that as an example before, and we do not have that, we have to correct it. Okay, we want to correct it for our records as well. It could result in an increase. I'm not trying to discourage you from filing an appeal. I've heard numerous cases in Mercer. I've never ruled where, hey, let's raise the assessment. Maybe fix it for next year, but let's not raise it now. Hey, what do you do to file at the county board? If your property is assessed at over $1 million, you can go directly to state tax court. If it's less than that, your first stop is the county board of taxation, and the appeal will be with them. You can download the appeal form from the county tax board website. Now, this says in Somerset you can file online, but you can't. You can download the form, but they require that you appear in person to pay the filing fee. Or mail in the filing fee. Okay, so, and we have the same thing in a similar situation in Mercer because of the credit card charges and, you know, what we can do and what we can't do. It's just for the few people in my county that would like to do that, it just doesn't work out between the Treasury Department, our office, and the taxpayer. It's suggested on the form, and I'll put an exhibit up, that you supply 5 comparable sales. I don't know how Charles feels about this, but I think the 5 came about because there's 5 lines on the form. If there was 3 lines, we'd probably have to have 3. So if you have 3 good comps, I'm an appraiser. If I have 3 good comps, I'm lucky. So I think you're safe with 3. The township will not protest the fact that you have 3 and you could have had 5. With respect to searching for comparable sales, the first thing, whether it's an appraisal course, an assessment course, the first thing that an instructor will tell you is look for a property like yours that's geographically close to yours. So the first thing you want to look at is location, home style, then get into the amenities. But, and sometimes distance doesn't matter. You're going to have to go where the comparables are. What are some sources? And I would only use these, at least some of these, as a starting point. Realtor.com, people have gone on that. Zillow, good starting point, but don't stop there, because some of the information is misinterpreted, mislabeled. I would say, in my experience, in my personal business, that those search vehicles are somewhere between 70 and 80% accurate. And I'm not going to, as an appraiser, state my reputation on what I picked up off the internet. I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to go see the assessor. How many square foot is this house, so we start off on the same page? You want to be in agreement with the specifics of the property before you go to the county. Don't walk into the county and say, I measured my house and it's 2,000 square feet, and Rick says it's 3,000. That's not going to get you anywhere, okay? And remember that, I know I sort of touched upon this, that quality is better than quantity. Don't look for a dozen sales. Usually when I do some review work in my private practice, when I look at some appraisals and the appraiser has 6, 7, 8, 9 sales, that tells me one thing. He couldn't find any good sales, so he just packed the report with a bunch of stuff. Okay, this is the, and again, I apologize, you could just about see that, but that's the appeal form that's available on the internet. Can you fill it out on the internet, Charles, and then print it? Yeah, you could fill it out. Yeah, you could fill it out on the internet, and then you could print it, and you could see sort of in the body there, I believe it's section 2, you see the 5 lines. But again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I don't think that would be required. Okay. At the county board, you want to be able to discuss the similarities and dissimilarities of your comparables. Again, do some investigation, confirm with a party privy to the sale, if you know the buyer and seller, if you can look at a deed and get the attorney that prepared it. Most of the properties that we come across that have been sold went through a local broker. And our experience has been, most of them are very, very helpful. Just as a tip, come early, and if you're scheduled for 10 o'clock, try and get there at 9. You see a couple cases before, so you get a flavor of the process. And I would suggest you get as many photos as you can. One of the good things in MLS now is the listings are packed with interior photos, and they help a lot. Most of the issues come, at least before our board, relate to the interior finishes, new bedroom, I misspoke, new bathroom, new kitchen, amenities that add to value. There are a number of, there's 4 deductions. These are all $250 off your tax bill. If you have any interest in these, senior resident, you have to be over 65, and there's a bunch of other qualifications. A disabled person, surviving spouse of a veteran, or a veteran himself or herself. They're all $250 deductions. An exemption, we have wartime disability if you were honorably discharged actively from the service, and the VA has determined you to be 100% and permanently disabled, you're exempt from your entire tax liability. And lastly, we have exemptions and abatements. There are certain modifications to your home that qualify for abatements. That's been determined by the governing body here. It's permitted under the statute, provided that the governing body provides the underlying ordinance to support that. Okay. Mayor?
So now if you have questions, please come up to the mic. And let them come up. I don't understand. To do the timer. Sorry. Well, while he's doing that, I'll do my bit very quickly. So once you have an assessment, what most people care about is how that turns into the taxes. So how do we calculate the tax rate? And it's very simple. We take what the budget is, and then we take all the other ways the budget is funded. Grants, state funding, hotel tax, et cetera, and we subtract that out, and what's left over is the amount that we have to tax. We then divide that by the total assessment that he has done. So it's roughly $12 billion for the town. And the number's just up there at the bottom. That was the total assessment in 2022. $12 billion, I can barely see it, $500,000. So you divide the money we want, which is about 26 million last year, by 12 billion, and then you multiply by 100 just because the numbers would be too small, and that's the tax rate. Something to be careful about with many politicians, will tell you, look, the tax rate went down. The tax rate will go down if the percent of real estate, or if real estate increases by a greater percent than the amount that they're collecting by taxes increases. So that they could still be getting more money, but the tax rate goes down only because there's a greater assessment. If your assessment goes up and the tax rate goes down, then it's a race between the two as to whether your taxes will go down. The fairest way to look at it is to look at the average house times the tax rate to see how much taxes the average house is paying last year versus this year. But so we take and that's how you figure out your taxes. You take the tax rate and then multiply it by the value of your house and divide by 100, and that's how much taxes you will pay. If everybody's tax assessment, every institution in town, every place he inspects, every place that pays taxes, if their assessment were to double, then everyone's taxes would remain the same, and the tax rate would be cut in half. So just be careful when people claim that the tax rate's gone down. You have to see what actually happens to the tax. The way I think about it is the amount that I'm going to pay in taxes is the value of my house divided by the total assessment of the entire town. So my house it's public record, I think 560,000, divided by 12 billion, and then multiply it by the amount of money that we want to collect in taxes, which is 26 million. The last thing I'm going to get into, well, the second to last thing I'm going to get into is that some people will accuse us of telling him to assess a little higher so that we get more money. As he said, the only thing I've ever told him is do it fair, because it doesn't matter what he does. If we want $26 million, we're going to get $26 million, and the tax rate is adjusted mathematically to hit that $26 million. So I don't care how he assesses, other than I want it to be fair. I suppose it would be politically better if he were to assess businesses higher than homes, because I'm going to please more voters that way, but I wouldn't dare tell him to do that. You didn't hear me even say that. The very last thing I'm going to talk about is, I just thought I was curious, is how does it split up as to the assessed value in town? Residential is about 64%. There's roughly 20,000 residential institutions, and there's under 1,000 commercial, industrial, and apartments. So commercial, industrial, and apartments, if you add all those up, they're roughly a little less than 35%. And then you can see farmland assessment and vacant land take up a tiny sliver of it all. So yes, we get most of our money from residential. And when we talk about building up the ratables, while a resident is a ratable, what we're really talking about is building up the commercial and industrial, because as those slices of the pie get bigger, the residential slice gets smaller. In other words, your taxes go down. That's all I have. So now would be a good time to have questions. Anyone wishing to speak, come up to the microphone. Let's do 3 minutes. That sound fair to everyone?
As I was asking before, how do you calculate the land assessment? Not the building, but the land. How does that get figured out?
The process is the same for improved properties or vacant properties, and we look at what comparable sales will sell for, and we come up with a land value map, and that becomes the underlying value for the land portion of your assessment. Just one thing that I mean, there's quite a bit involved in the appeal process, but you want to remember the number under appeal is the total assessment. So the law doesn't permit you to separate the land and the improvements and say, well, I like this part, but I'm going to challenge the other part. You have to look at the total assessment.
Two questions. First question is, if I want to make improvements to my property, how would I get a good idea of how that would affect my tax assessment?
Excellent question, and we get a lot of calls like that. Call my office, now, here's what happens, though. People call and say, I want to put an addition on, what's it going to, well, how big's the addition? Well, we didn't decide yet. So, well, you have to, if you know what you want to do, wait till you have it mapped out. And we could tell you within real close figure what it's going to do to your assessment. And once you know that, you use the mayor's formula and you'll know what that added tax liability will be, assuming that the improvement contributes to value. I mean, there are people that make improvements, and I'm one of them. I'm not attacking them. I'm one of them. I'm sure I spent money in things that I'm not going to ever see again. But it has to make a material change in the value for us to change that.
So my second question is there a cap on the amount of taxes we could collect as a town on property taxes?
There's a cap on how much we can raise taxes, how much we can increase. There's a 2% cap.
There's a levy tax.
Right.
Levy is the amount to be raised by taxes, and the state of New Jersey caps that levy at a certain amount, all right, a percentage, and there are things that will allow for an exception to that levy cap. And for instance, there's a levy cap bank. Okay, and a levy cap bank means if a municipality raises tax, their amount to be raised by taxes is less than 2% in a year, the balance can be added to a tax levy bank that carries over for 3 years, and it's a recurring thing. So you have 3 years worth of reserve levy bank that you can use. I've been manager for 10 years. We've not used our levy cap bank at all in the 10 years that I've been township manager.
The reason you do that is you don't want to force a town to raise taxes because they're afraid that if they don't, they're not going to have enough money later on. So it allows towns to take it slower that way.
And one of the other reasons to do it is that there are times when a municipality is required to do an emergency appropriation. Let me just hit that. An emergency appropriation because of some natural disaster or something that you would have a 1-year large expense. So, for instance, we did an emergency appropriation after Hurricane Ida. And we wound up being able to write that emergency appropriation off because in the end of that calendar year, we had sufficient funds to cover the costs associated with the recovery from Hurricane Ida. But if you don't do that, you're required to include it in your budget for the next year. So some towns have had emergency appropriations in the millions of dollars. A small town that experienced, a small town down the shore during Superstorm Sandy had a huge expense and a huge emergency appropriation. Well, they needed to do a 1-year increase in taxes that would have exceeded the levy cap. And that, so that's another reason why the state allows for that to happen.
Yeah, Mayor, to add to that, we haven't used it, again, I believe, ever, but there are a lot of exemptions that towns have when they wrote the law where certain increases.
Well, that's appropriations, not levy, two different things.
No, I just want to be clear. We've been following that 2%, I believe, pretty
All I'm
solidly.
saying is we've been well under the 2%
Right, but
levy tax.
But a town
Yeah.
can raise more than 2% if there's costs that come in that are exempted from that cap.
No, that's an appropriations cap. There are two caps in the state of New
Okay, so
Jersey. Appropriations cap and levy cap. And the levy cap is a hard 2%. Appropriations cap is where things are, what we say, outside of the cap, and that's for appropriations.
That's what I
yes.
meant. I didn't
But
use the word
that's not
appropriations,
levy.
but we haven't done that as a town.
Well, we always do everything that's outside of the cap, budgeted outside of the cap.
But we've stuck to the 2% for many years, have we not? Or less. Last
Well,
year, many times it was zero.
In the last 5 years, we've raised taxes, or raised the levy 1%.
Right.
I guess my point is, when the law passed, it sounded good, but towns still had a lot of leadway to go higher than 2%. We have actually consistently have gone lower, at least for the last several years. It's good that they have the cap, but
Anyone else?
Rick, do you think maybe we could turn the podium around for the people, and then you could just have a seat at the table? That might be easier. And then people can have a location to go to. Perfect.
It's going to take some, go ahead, take this. It's going to take some time, so I'm going to make this quick and easy. I have 2 copies. Here's the questions I have right off the bat. When I was looking at my tax, I had what I called a stealth tax I didn't know about, and it was the right to build. And I was told the figure was $43,500 times the size of the property. But when I asked your assistant, no one could tell me how they came up with the $43,500. That's the one question. The second was on the adjustments that you put on taxes. There's a formula that's supposed to be used for that. And when I look at it, and I've gone through all of the records here, I'm seeing helter-skelter. It doesn't seem to be following a standard formula. Folks that are in over 65 that meet the income requirements, their taxes should be level. So that adjustment should be, in my mind, each year getting a little larger as the taxes are increasing, okay? And then the third thing is the records that are kept by the county, should they be exactly the same as the records that you have here? I don't know if you can answer all of those. Those are my concerns. I have a copy here of them for you to look at.
You have to talk into the mic.
And I will give you a call. And I will give you a call this week so we can talk about it. Because I have a lot of issues. My taxes, by the way, went up $800. 1,467 square foot house. That's a lot of money in 1 year to have a boost. So I just have those concerns there. Thank you for the presentation and for the good job you're doing here in town.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you have any immediate answers? or you
Yeah,
didn't have to?
I think I could answer some of them.
Okay.
If I understand your first question, you talked about the right to build. That, the formula is for, and this is by manual, it isn't our method, but I can tell you that it's a generally accepted appraisal methodology as well. The concept is that the basic right to build is a site value. That comes with your, in this case, land. We're talking about land, your land assessment. In order to tweak that or modify that, for example, if you had a property that was 1 acre, we have a land value formula. I talked about a land value map. A land value formula for that site and that neighborhood. It's composed of 2 components. One is the site value, which is the basic right to build, and then that's adjusted based upon the size. Now, if you have a 1/4 acre lot, we may be talking about so much per square foot of land. If you're out in a rural section, maybe we're talking about so much per acre. We could be talking about so much for the first acre over the site value, the first 3 acres, the first 5 acres, the first 10. So the formula goes on and on and on. But it's,
Understand the formula.
Have-
through land analysis, through the sale of vacant land, yes.
Okay, I need you to talk into the mic.
It's the same methodology, if that's your question, yes. And it's not the same formula because areas have different values. A lot in one part of town may be worth, may have a site value that's half of another area of town. But each neighborhood, we refer to them as VCSs, has its own land value formula. Some may be the same, but we compute them separately.
Next question.
The tax question, Mayor, I'm not sure that that's something I could handle. See Charles looking at me. I don't know how, unless there was a mix-up, that the county records could be different than the township records. It's the same database. So in answer to your question, yes. Now, we did have a conversion 2 years ago from one vendor to another. It may look different, but hopefully if that data was exchanged properly, the results should be the same. It's the same base, and I think our collector and everyone down the line should have the same starting point, unless somebody goes in and changes something. And what was your last question? Your taxes went up $800. I think you want to remember what we said early on. Mayor emphasized it as well. We're looking at your assessment. I don't know what $800 translates to in value, depending on what district you're in. But how do you feel about the value of your home during that same time frame? Did the value of your home go up? Okay.
All right, so when we come, wait, sir, one, you would have to talk into the mic, and two, if it's about a single family or a single home, then it's best that you have that offline with him, because he'll be able to look at your records and help you.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, sir, was one of the last slides I had. Those determinations are made by the legislature here in New Jersey.
So
It's not local.
Yeah, he's the assessor. He assesses property. He doesn't assign taxes. He doesn't adjust taxes. So
The collector. The tax collector is who assigns adjustments to a tax bill, correct, not the assessor. So that would be the tax collector's office. And in this particular case, I think one of the confusions may be that while your tax rate is frozen, the assessment on your property, that's not frozen. So that continues to change both up and down based on a market analysis that's done by the assessor's office and the other things that he spoke about. So that senior tax freeze, it freezes your taxes, but it doesn't freeze the assessment of your property. Your property will still go up and down based on the things that Mr. Carabelli spoke about previously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next person, please. And if these are things about your own property, it's probably best you talk to him separately, but go ahead, sir.
You mentioned that there's a file for your property that you keep locally, that has how they came up with the whole evaluation, like the houses they looked at and things like that?
Can you restate your question, sir? You started with your property, and then you went to
No,
comparable
I'm
sales?
talking about the file you have on my property. Do you have a record that says these are the houses that you looked at that come up with the value?
We don't designate that for every single property, but we could show you what we did for properties in your neighborhood. It's not a real estate appraisal, it's mass valuation. So we're doing a number of properties at one time. So the properties that we consider similar to yours? The answer to your question is yes.
Yeah, you can give me that.
I could show you, well, I had it as one of my slides. If you were in that neighborhood, I could give you that, yes.
If I'm in a different neighborhood, you could give me
I
that
could,
slide?
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And my wife said that, I didn't see it, but the property went up like, I got 100 by 110 property. They said it went up $500 a quarter for my property, and it's only 100 by 110 property. Does that make sense? Or,
Your tax liability went up
yes,
$500
A quarter.
So that's, your tax bill went up 2,000.
and based on it, she said
And
the
all
property.
you don't have any improvements, you just have,
No.
like the mayor said, if you want to give me a call, we'll be happy to take a look at it for you. Why don't you wait until you get your notice, which is going to come out shortly, and then give me a call.
Give you a call then.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you very much.
okay, thank you.
Can you please give me the county source you were talking about that we could look up for properties, or maybe I misunderstood? You have a database. And can anybody just look up and see, this is the tax for a particular property, or this is what it's sold for? And where would I look that up? I just don't know.
Into the
Microphone,
mic,
Rick.
please.
Sorry. I have that in my office. If you want to call, I can email it to you.
Okay, your number's on here somewhere?
I'd be happy to give it to you.
All right.
So you want the assessment value?
Yeah, I'm just,
They're online on the township website, too.
on our township,
Yeah.
the assessment and what it has sold for, sales of properties, is that part
That
of
it?
last sale on is available.
Yeah, the sale of the property you're inquiring, you'll have that. But if you're looking for a list of sales,
No, just a particular property.
oh, that'll be on the card, yeah, assuming that it, is a recent sale. If it's from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it may not be there. But if it's relatively recent, in the past 10 or 20 years, you find it in the files, yeah.
On a site?
On the website,
County
yes.
site, okay. And this is just like a little story, but I know a young couple, they were looking at a house in Franklin Township, and they said it was $400-something thousand, which might be what my home is. And I said, oh, what are the taxes? She said, $6,000. I know mine is a lot more, maybe similar price. So if a house is, let's say they ended up buying it, does it get an automatic reassessment at that time? Somebody would come in and look it over, and it's not going to be 6,000. It could end up jumping up to 8,000. I know I'm not being clear.
Yeah, I think you have
but-
three questions there.
Yeah.
The first one is, does the assessment go up because they bought the house?
Well, not because they bought it, but.
Because of what they paid for the house?
Yes.
No. That's not the only basis. That sale, if that's typical of the market, may result in all the homes in that neighborhood going up. Maybe not to the number that they paid. But you understand that sale becomes a comparable sale for that neighborhood. You can't go in, the assessor can't go in, this is in the state of New Jersey, you can't go in and change the value on a property because it's sold to
Okay.
that number.
So
sold
they
for-
wouldn't get hit, the only people to get hit with the increase. It would impact all the neighbors at some point.
If it was something that triggered an adjustment in that neighborhood as a result of our reassessment program, the assessment could go up, yes.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay, I think I got from you before, you said you do like a mass assessment. So like what I was explaining before, for last year's assessment, myself and four of my direct neighbors, we all had the same $105,000 increase in our assessment. Now, my house was only previously, the year before, $246,000, so I jumped up to $351,000. Now, my neighbors was $350,000 the year before, so they jumped up to the $460,000, $465,000. So my percent increase in my assessment was 42.6%, while theirs was only 25. Now, that made a significant difference in my property tax increase. So is that a case where I would come to you and ask, about that?
I think you did, didn't you?
No, I didn't know we can do that, so I ended
Oh.
up appealing. So next time I would come to you first.
I think that was in my presentation. First thing,
Yes, yes.
call the assessor.
So that
Yeah,
that
but
was
you-
good to learn.
You look familiar. I know we met when you came in.
Yeah, when I
But
did
we
the appeal.
didn't settle this with you? Was there an
did.
error or something?
No, I appealed and then
Well, you brought it to our
I-
attention and we adjusted it.
I didn't bring it to
Well,
your
that's how,
attention.
yeah, that's
Into
how it's
the
brought to our
mic, please.
attention.
Yeah.
That's how it's brought to our attention.
Yes,
It's-
yes.
If people, again, it's not, I'm going to sit here and say it's perfect, again,
No.
there's over 20,000 properties that we're looking at. There's going to be situations like
Right.
this. And that's why I said, when I showed the assessment notice, that's the most important thing you're going to get. But if you see something on there that catches your eye and say, hey, this isn't right, we'll fix it.
So that could be fixed rather than going through the appeal process.
Yeah,
Okay.
but typically what happens is, and I said this as well, it's sort of a catch-22. You get the notice, and then the only way it could be fixed is through an appeal. So if you don't come and see me, if it's our mistake, we'll fix it. You won't have to go to Somerville. If it is, and if it's not our mistake, well, then we'll let Charles's board decide.
Okay, perfect. And then my other question was, so there was an agreement to decrease my assessed value. So when I went on the website, though, it still lists the original assessed value, although it makes the calculation difference for the taxes due. So does that mean anything, or does?
That means that the system that we were working under at that time, once the assessment list comes out, and it's going to come out next week, that number is going to come up every time for the whole year, even though it's adjusted.
The original
it could-
assessed will come up.
The original assessment, the assessment on your notice card, even if you got it reduced to zero,
Okay.
it's still going to be what's on that. But the important thing is the collector will get a copy of our settlement and make the appropriate adjustments in her office.
Okay.
So the billing changes, even though, if you're worried about it, bring it in. The collector's probably not going to appreciate me telling you this, but she can change it manually.
Got it.
Take out her pen and change it.
But it's really not.
But
a
it's
big
not,
deal.
no.
Okay.
The official, when you get that judgment from Charles, that's it. That's your ticket.
Got it. Okay,
And everybody's getting a copy here too, so.
okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Because the other thing, just to add to that, is that the books that exist on the shelf outside of Mr. Carabelli's office and Ms. Gutierrez's office, who's the tax collector, those books are published once a year. That's the numbers are in there, so that doesn't change either. So that kind of stays along with what Mr. Carabelli said, that it doesn't get updated until the next tax year.
Anyone else?
Met before, and I've had the pleasure to work with your office. The one question I have, the spreadsheet you showed with the blue and the yellow, you've made that accessible to us, and it's great when you're trying to understand whether it comes to you with a problem or not. In the analysis, though, it'd be easier to be able to get that on a spreadsheet than on a printed piece of paper. Possible to get that? So if I came to you and I told you, here are the neighborhoods that my home is in, I'd like to see the comparables of this home sold as of October 1st, 2022. Rather than giving it to me on a piece of paper, can you make it accessible through a spreadsheet?
I could check with IT. I mean, we're talking about one frame, Bob.
Yeah, no, I think I'll talk in higher levels than just you and where you live. One of the things that we're always very cautious of, and why he says we can talk to the IT department, is that we would have to protect the document, because we can't have a document that has all of that information that's then could be edited by someone and presented as fact when in fact it's not. So that's part of the issue with especially with Excel documents. That's generally why, people like us convert things to PDF, so that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Because it, again, becomes a document that can be manipulated, and that's where the problem lies. But the document that he showed today, I don't believe had comps. That was
No.
just the assessment.
Yeah, so
and
basically-
the ups and downs of the assessment in a neighborhood.
Exactly.
I don't know, and you don't have to tell me, but one of the things we've seen, and this is where Mr. Carabelli and I've used to take this dog and pony show on the road with the mayor to various locations pre-COVID. We've spent some time in clubhouses, and I'm going to stop this right now because I'm talking. And our gated communities, our senior communities, whatever we want to call them, I call them 55 and over because I think that's where I fall in the category now, 55 and over, and I can say that. You have many models in our 55 and over communities, and a model becomes a neighborhood. So comparisons in locations like Canal Walk and Somerset Run and Renaissance, or even some of our other non-55 and over neighborhoods like Quailbrook or Levitt, for that matter, there are models, and models are the same, and the model becomes the neighborhood rather than the geographic location, right? So that's where those spreadsheets are helpful if you're looking at
That's exactly-
comparisons, and I think that's what
exactly
you're
what I'm
talking
looking
about,
for.
right? There you go, so.
Because what I ended
yeah.
up doing is taking.
Well, we would
yeah,
just have to lock the document so you couldn't edit it, that's all.
That's fine, as long, if I'd be able to sort it.
Right, you'd be able to sort it,
That's all I want.
exactly, and that's fine.
Thank you, that saves me a lot of
Yep.
time.
Anyone else?
It's just a general question. Is your township budget, is that public information on your website? Just
Absolutely. It's the manager's budget until he gives it to the council, and we have a little ritual now that he basically presses a button when at that meeting, and it goes up instantly.
So if you go to the township website and you go to the finance department,
Okay.
the budgets, I believe, go back to like 2013, 2012, 2013 to 2022 right now are available. The budgets, the audits, and the amended financial statements of the town are on the finance department website.
And in-
Okay, it's just my curiosity, like how,
Yeah.
like, all my property taxes, how's that allocated among
So interesting,
schools,
so that,
schools,
so,
government
and the mayor
officials?
didn't talk about this, and I was surprised that you didn't.
What?
Because you often do. When he showed his graph earlier, I think a key point to this discussion here in our council chambers is that about 15 or 16% of your tax bill goes to us. About 65% goes to the Board of Education.
Okay.
About 15 or 16% goes to Somerset County, and the balance goes to a fixed rate open space tax, so that's a 5% tax, and your fire district tax. And then there's also a library tax and a county open space tax. So we're only 15%, so if you paid $10,000 in property tax last year, $1,500 came to Franklin Township in the form of a municipal tax.
That's exactly what I wanted to know.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
And in March, we have 2 or 3 meetings that go extensively into how the budget is divvied up and spent. And if you come to those meetings, you'll be the only one there.
And the mayor
I
does
work in accounting, so like, that's where the question came from. Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else?
Mayor, I just wanted to add 2 other things, and maybe Mr. Carabelli or our guest in the audience from the county board. Another method of determining comps if you're filing an appeal is the county clerk's website. The county clerk has a land record search function that if you sign up and give, just create a username and password, if you're aware of a piece of property that has been sold in the last year, I know that house down the street sold. The filing of the deed can be, you can look up the deed on the county website. That goes back to 1977 land records on our county clerk's page. It's a good resource for people who are looking up properties, if you're looking for specific properties. If you have a block and lot number, which you can get from us on the township website, and then go to the county page, you can get it. And it's, what you want to see is, I know the house down the street sold, so I want to use that as a comp in my appeal or my analysis. Well, you have to make sure that it was an arm's length sale, right? We all know what an arm's length sale is. So you'll be able to determine that by looking it up on the county clerk's page. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is just something that my wife said it to me on Friday, and Mr. Carabelli talked about it tonight, and I know many people do this, and you should not do this because it's not always accurate. Do not use your assessment card to determine how much you paid in property tax in the previous year. Because if you get any of those adjustments like the gentleman spoke about earlier, that won't be on your assessment card because that's done by the collector's office. So if your tax bill for 2022 was $10,250, but you got the $250 deduction for one thing and you have the senior freeze or whatever else it might be, that's not what you paid, and you'll be reporting incorrectly to the IRS the amount of money that you paid in property tax. Just so happens my assessment card is how much I pay because I don't get any deductions, but so she can give that to the accountant. But I caution people because they'll often call me in the upcoming weeks, they'll call my office and say, I didn't get my card yet and I need to file my taxes. Well, but that's not how you find out how much you paid. Now, you can use the township website. If you go into the function to pay your taxes online, it's called WIP, W-I-P-P. That will give you the amount of money you paid in the previous year in taxes to include the deductions that are taken off. So just a little tidbit.
So I have one question, Mr. Carabelli. Do you coordinate with the construction department? For instance, I just upgraded a bathroom, so I filed for a permit and I put down the value of the upgrade. Do you look at that and?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Rats.
Oh, and that was another question. So I had a question for Mr. Carabelli related to the gentleman who asked about putting an addition on his house. Is that another method to determine the value of an addition on the house, is to go to the construction department and find the value of the construction listed on all of the permits necessary?
We've never used that.
Okay.
For two reasons. One is, I don't know that it's all inclusive. It's sometimes they're vague. And the other thing is, when you rely on a source other than what you're doing for the homes that you've already assessed, then you're developing a new standard evaluation. So there's two things that we look for in assessing. Obviously, you look for a correct value, or a value that mirrors the full and fair value of the property. And then the other thing you want to do as an assessor is treat everybody equally. So like the mayor said, if everybody's 20% over assessed, you're still going to pay the same. If somebody's 10% under assessed, as long as everybody's treated the same, you're all going to pay the same. That's the intent of the assessment statute.
So finding the cheapest contractor isn't the best way to go then?
No, well, finding someone that may understate what they're actually charging you isn't always the best route either.
Okay, very quick. Is the state representative here? Are they all out in the hallway?
I think they're all in the hallway, Mayor.
Just a quick question, allude to his question about upgrading, his bathroom and stuff. If it's just all cosmetic, why would there be a need to reassess? I mean, I understand if you're redoing the plumbing or electrical fixtures, that might be a different story, but if you're just changing like the vanity sink or just changing the toilet and putting new floors, why would there be a need for a reassessment?
In the examples that you've given, you're correct. There is no need.
Okay.
But some of the times the mayor asks if we coordinate it with the construction office with respect to permits, probably maybe 20% or so require an inspection. An office building, we have an office building assessed as an office. If they move a couple partitions, get a new tenant, it's still the office building that we assessed. What happened inside may be new wallpaper, new paint, new carpet. We don't go in and adjust it. We wouldn't do it in a home. If one of the big issues that come up, and I could tell you there's probably going to be some appeals this year, there is every year, people say, well, I didn't do anything to my kitchen. And then you go in, they have new floor, granite tops, new cabinets, and then on the other side, you have somebody just went in and painted and maybe replaced a cabinet door or something like that. No, we're not going to go in and change the assessment. Most of the construction permits that we get, we just file them. They don't require any action, any inspection. They're just like you say, the improvements don't contribute to the value of the property.
Okay, that clarifies.
Yeah, the biggest ones I know from dealing with Mr. Carabelli's office are additions to a house, the fitting out of an unfinished portion of a building. For instance, you have an unfinished basement, but now you have a finished basement, because now not only have you a finished basement that's increased the value, but you've also increased the square footage of livable space, which is part of the evaluation process on an assessment. So those things, which are the permits that are shared from the construction department, are relevant. It's probably the most common thing is finishing a basement.
Thank you.
I believe, I'm not sure, Charles maybe can help me. I heard that there's legislation, proposed legislation, that any added assessment can only be triggered by an addition to the property, not a change or updating or remodeling.
So the next part of our program is a presentation from a representative from the state about the Anchor program. Come on up. Sure. Got to get right up to the mic.
Let me make sure it's have a replacement for you. We knew you were coming. It's on TV. You have to be able, has to go through the sound system.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right, good, cool. Hi, everyone. Andrew Powers. I'm with the New Jersey Division of Taxation. We're in the lobby today helping anyone file their Anchor application. If you've heard about Anchor, it's a program to provide property tax relief for homeowners and renters who meet certain qualifications. If you filed already, great. If you need help filing, we're out in the lobby. We encourage anyone who thinks they're eligible, talk to us. We have a billboard that shows out the different eligibility requirements. But we're just trying to get the word out, get people to file. If you know anyone who hasn't filed, who is a renter, especially renters, who hasn't found this program yet, encourage them to file. It's pretty easy. We do it online, anchor.nj.gov.
What are the requirements?
It's two different things. So you have to either be a homeowner or a renter as of October 1st, 2019, and then there's income requirements. So for 2019 gross income, if you were a homeowner, you have to be under $250,000, and if you're a tenant or renter, it has to be under $150,000. So if you meet those two qualifications, you're eligible. So file, come to us if you need help, and just help spread the word. We'd appreciate it.
And that's income in what year?
2019. It's your 2019 New Jersey gross income. So if you have your tax returns, you can pull it from there. If you're coming out to us, we have access to all that information, so we can do everything from top to bottom.
All right.
They have all that tax information there at their fingertips.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
That concludes our town hall meeting on assessments. Thank you.